Welcome back, everybody, to season 2 of the Fearlessly Human podcast. Yay! This season is called The Feedback Fix, and we're going to do this season a little bit different, Kavita and I. We are going to break it down to chunk sizes of useful data points and some practicing pieces. And for this episode, we're going to talk to you about one concept in particular, that feedback really is a system. And I'll get into that here in a minute. And then we're going to go into the arc we would describe of what our season's going to look like. Then we'll wrap it back up with a reminder of the important points.
Yeah, we've learned a lot from the previous season ourselves, and we've taken feedback, and so this is really feedback in place.
Yeah, the irony of our second season being about feedback is not lost on me. So thank you to all those folks that have. And remember that as you find this stuff useful and you want to share, make sure you remember to subscribe too. So if it's okay, I'm going to jump into the concept for this particular one that I really wanted people to think about. We were excited when we came up with this idea, and we had 1,000 different ways we could go into talking about feedback, right? And the two primary things that people think about are, how do you give feedback? Like, they think about it like with giving feedback. And then people think about, how do I receive it? What it feels like to get feedback. But the reality is there's actually a whole system that goes in play. And it's important to think of it from that standpoint. How do I get this person to receive the feedback? And that's an intentional sort of thought process. And then how do I receive it? So the receiving kind of can go both directions, right? But it's also about then, how do I regulate myself? How do I become more in tune with the approach of managing my own emotions, my breathing, heart rate, that flushed face that some folks have, and really being sort of more centered in your body, both ends, both giving it and sort of receiving it. And then there's a whole process about, how do you actually process that feedback? What do you do with it? How do you take it in? And then, of course, there's a whole process about giving feedback, or specifically seeking it. How do you ask for it in a way that becomes pretty genuine and authentic? So it really is an entire process and a whole system that I feel people don't necessarily take it to the next level. And that's really what we're going to try to do this season.
Yeah. And when we start talking about the season, and we call it Feedback Fix, and there's a play on the word fix. So it's both like your breakfast fix, but also fixing feedback as people tend to look at it. You cannot ignore one or the other aspect. And so that's where we wanted to take this season, because this is a very important and powerful skill. It's almost unavoidable. You get feedback all the time. Some generations actually thrive on feedback and are very comfortable seeking feedback. And as we navigate through life, this is a skill which you can either take as, oh yeah, we'll receive it. Everyone has some kind of a skill around feedback. But what we really wanted to do was intentionally get you to think about the whole system. This is not just a process of step 1, step 2, step 3. Unless everything works coherently, we're not really going to make the best use of feedback.
In my clinical practice, a lot of times I'll have a client come in and talking about some feedback that they were given, often unsolicited, and they are sort of upset about it, raging, hurt, and really want me to give them permission to let it go. And I'm able to walk them through, are there any pieces that are useful, that are worthy of doing? And that takes some time and effort to learn to do. And then there's always the problem where, someone asks you for feedback, like in the moment, and you're not prepared. So I know we're talking about trying to be prepared and to think it through, but it's probably going to be pretty important to learn how to manage that request for asking, someone's asked you for feedback on the fly.
What would be useful is to just take everyone through the whole arc of this episode, what we're going to cover. So really quickly, so this episode is sort of a map to the entire season, and we start with receiving feedback. That's where we need to focus, because essentially we can't control anything other than us. So the first parts, which is around receiving feedback, is focused on us, is about giving skills that we can learn and practice. And within that, there is a choice you make. And that choice is about curiosity. So we talk about that in the second episode. The third episode then really focuses on what you do to yourself to get prepared for the act of feedback, whether you're receiving, giving, seeking, whatever. And that's really important, because once you understand what's happening to you inside your head, then you get into a better frame of understanding what that feedback is all about. The next thing we walk through is around processing feedback. Now, not many people talk about this. Part of our proposition is that feedback is data that you're receiving or you're giving. So what is really fundamental to that is it can just sit there, or you can process it and make it useful. So we do spend a whole episode about processing feedback. And then, of course, the favorite one, which is giving feedback. And we're focused on feedback that lands. So intentional feedback that is effective. And then really particularly for this day and age and some of our younger generations, it's about how do you seek feedback? Well, why am I saying younger generation? I cringe when I have to seek feedback. It's almost, how do you seek feedback? How do you get good feedback or useful feedback, dare I say? So we go through that, and it is about purposeful seeking of feedback. Then we get into some of the more trickier things that both of us have come across in our profession. So what do you do with unsolicited feedback? There's a lot of that.
Yes. Yes.
And really, how do you convert noise that you get into useful signals? And then about curiosity, and really about what do you do in terms of that shame that comes with feedback? So how do you step out of shame, nervousness, etc., into curiosity? So it's all about monitoring that self-talk. And then we're really talking about venting versus feedback. I paused here because we've talked about this in our previous season as well. It is important to make a distinction. And so we'll take you through what are the signs that someone's just venting and how to avoid, let's say, that minefield of giving feedback when someone just wants to vent. And then finally, this was one of our discoveries, was how do you receive praise without cringing? Yep, so that's the whole season, 10 episodes, and we're going to have fun, and we hope you'll find it useful.
When we were thinking about feedback, this episode or this whole season, the feedback fix, we had lots of different directions that we can take, and we hope to kind of put in there some stories that I feel will help utilize these concepts and then that land. And many of the stories are not pretty. They're ugly stories that we've all experienced in some capacity. And we're going to be brave, fearlessly human in this season, and offer maybe some of our mistakes and what we learned from some of them as well. In addition to trying to give you guys some good takeaways and some things to have useful sound bites from each of these episodes.
Just as a sample, what happens when someone kind of just turns up and on the fly gives you some feedback?
Yeah, like walking down the hallway. Hey, I'm glad I saw you. Let me tell you something. And you're just walking by. You're on the way, to the break room or to the bathroom, or you open up an email maybe, and that's a little different because it gives you a little more time to think about to respond. But I have found what's really kind of useful, especially if the feedback is critical, but not necessarily intended as mean. You can kind of tell. Having a few phrases that give you some time to sort through, to take a breath, to kind of pause for a little bit. Like, okay, I wasn't expecting to think about that right now, but hang on, let me give me a second to catch up to you, to where you're at. And even just in those few seconds of saying that gives you a little bit of time to start that process, that whole system that we were talking about. Like, yep, this is one of those unsolicited, but you know what? Maybe it's your boss giving it to it, so you got to listen. Or it's a friend or a colleague. And that gives you a chance to kind of slow things down and to stop and think a little bit more. So give me a second to catch up to where you're at. And then we can talk about some things you'd say, like perhaps repeating back part of what they said. Or what actually lands a little bit better is tell me a little bit more about that kind of a comment. Can you narrow down, like if it was during a class maybe that I taught or a session, give me a few cues. Which section were you talking about? And getting them to kind of narrow it down to something hopefully that's a little more useful and bite-sized that you can do something with. So some of the phrases would be, well, hang on, I wasn't expecting to think about this. Give me a second to catch up to where you're at, might be one. Another thing would be like, okay, Tell me a little bit more. What has you thinking that way or feeling that way? What did I say or what did I do? Can you give me a more concrete example that I can learn from a little bit? And hopefully you're utilizing that time to kind of regulate yourself a little bit. And if it's a particularly important or sensitive topic, maybe we shouldn't have it in the hallway. All of those things can slow it down, let them know that you were listening, even if you didn't fully hear it. And it gives them a sense that you were paying attention and listening, but you get to kind of take back some control of your time and space and control your own self.
So this is just a sample of what we'll go through in each of the episodes. So there will be a section where we'll give you some practical things that you can practice right away. In this instance, what we're saying is if feedback comes suddenly, you pause, you paraphrase, and you probe a little bit to buy time. And you use that time with some of the other skills that we're going to talk about. But essentially, you don't have to react right away. And that's really important to know. But unless you practice, you won't get it. So in the next 30 minutes, when that next unexpected feedback lands, try one of these things and let us know how it went.
Or you can watch how somebody else handles it and navigates it. It might come up around you. But the intention is to practice and learn and not to look back at the mistakes that you might have made in that moment, but better try to understand them. And these are skills that you can get better and better at.
What we're really trying to do is to give something that can be utilized right away and really want to get this message out. So if you know of someone else who is in a situation where they are having to deal with feedback, please feel free to share with them because we'd love to hear what else helps you in terms of feedback. And so feel free to comment as well.
On this journey, right, we want you guys to feel connected to the topic, to better understand something about the specific aspect of feedback or about yourself. And we want you to practice some of the tools and tips that we will talk about in here. So appreciate you guys joining us on this journey again for our second season of the Fearlessly Human podcast, The Feedback Fix. We'll see you guys then.
Bye.
All right.